Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for On the Rocks. So what On the Rocks is essentially about is we center on the character of Laura. She is this young mother who, she's having a really good life. Her husband is away on business currently, and she decides to take this time to reconnect with her estranged father. And in doing so, he starts to give her suspicions as to why her husband is actually gone, possibly hinting at an affair. And so now they are on a quest to see if this could be possible and also take the time to maybe reconnect. So On the Rocks overall, I was definitely very excited for this film. I mean, anything that A24 does right off the bat, I am very much into. You guys know how much I have praised A24 a lot, but also it being the big return for Sofia Coppola, who has not made a movie in quite some time, and I haven't seen like a lot of her movies, but of what I've seen, like say Lost in Translation or The Virgin Suicides, I've been a really big fan of. I think she's a very talented director, and I was excited to see what she was going to do with this film. I thought this could be a really good return for her. And look, I will say this, On the Rocks is not a terrible movie, but for Sofia Coppola standards, it is very subpar to what I think it could have ended up being. This is surprisingly a very basic and very simple film, and for me, it was definitely a very big disappointment. We're just getting into it right now. Now, I will say, the thing that definitely does work very well in this film is the cast here. I think all the performances are very strong, specifically that of Rashida Jones and Bill Murray. These two do a really good job, I think, anchoring this film. Both of them give some very believable performances. Rashida Jones, I think, does a really good job as this character that, like, wants to see the best in her husband, but at the same time is starting to have those doubts, and you can see how that's starting to affect her. But easily, I think the best part of this movie for me is Bill Murray. I think he owns this entire film. And look, we know Bill Murray is very funny. He does a very good job with the comedic aspects of this film. He has a lot of good moments, in that way because of his delivery and things like that. But it was the more heartfelt aspects that I think really worked about his character. He gives a lot of layers to the character of Felix that I feel like otherwise would not have been there. And I was very impressed by his performance, specifically in the third act of this movie. I think he has a lot of meat to chew, and I just really enjoyed his acting here. I thought he gave a very strong performance. And like I said, the chemistry between these two is very well handled. They work very well together in this movie. And I'd like to see them work together in hopefully a better film, because I think they definitely have it in them for sure. I think both of them did a good job in this film. And then the other performances here, I also was very impressed by. Marlon Wayans especially impressed me. It's very good to see him in something that isn't some like gross out comedy that he's directed. And I hope moving forward he continues to do more work like this, because this is definitely a more serious role. And he's shown before he can very much do it. Requiem for a Dream is easily my favorite performance from him, and I think it forever will be, but this very much showed me that, like, he can do more serious work if he wants to, and I hope he continues to, because I think he is a very talented actor when he sets his mind to it, and he very much does show that here. Jenny Slate was the only person in this film that I thought actually made me laugh. I thought she actually had some pretty funny moments in this movie, and I think she stole the show in quite a few parts, so I definitely did enjoy her overall. And then Jessica Henwick, for what she has, I think she gives a pretty strong performance. Everyone here does a good job in terms of acting, I would say. But now we get to the directing and the writing, and this is where we get to the things that just really don't work for me in this film. First of all, Sofia Coppola's directing here is just not really that great. It feels like in terms of directing, she really did not have that much to say. She didn't really have that much of a vision in terms of like what she wanted this film to be. It's very basic in terms of that. The comedy especially, though, just really fell flat for me. I did not find this film to be very funny, and I think that is unfortunately Coppola's fault. I think she just did not do a very good job with the humor here. I think it's not constructed very well, and I think the more heartfelt aspects of this movie, they feel very undermined. It feels like she's way too focused on the comedy here, and I think that's really what hurts this film in terms of directing, but her screenplay as well is so subpar, and I was surprised by just how utterly lazy a lot of this film really is, because yes, the premise itself is very basic, but unfortunately, that's all we're dealing with here. It's quite literally there's an incident that happens. She starts to suspect her husband's in an affair, and now her and her father are trying to see if this could potentially be the case. And that's really all that's going on here. There's not really much else going on in terms of the screenplay, and that's what was so disappointing to me about this film, because I feel like there were opportunities to dive into more. First of all, when it comes to Laura as a character, she's pretty flat. We don't really know too much about her. We know that she's aging, and like that could potentially play a role, and that she's had a good relationship with her husband up to this point, but it feels like there is some contention there, possibly. But aside from that, we really don't know much to her as a character, and so it's very hard to find any real investment in her. Her father, Felix, is far more interesting, because you get the sense that throughout the film he has some sort of ulterior motive. You know, he hasn't seen his daughter in a long time. He's clearly trying to use this as a way to reconnect with her, and I thought what they were going to do was dive a lot more into that relationship and show what that relationship did to reflect her current marriage. But unfortunately, no such storyline really happens. There is a revelation with his character in the third act, and it's a good one. But the problem is it comes far too late into the film, and I really wish they could have delved more into it. The effect that it had on Rashida Jones' character, what it did to her as a child, why her and her father have such a estranged relationship, and that why they really aren't that close, are just things I wish the film would have dived more into. And again, Murray is really going for it. You know, he really adds a lot of layers to this character, but unfortunately, without Murray's performance, taking that out of the equation, there just isn't much to either of these characters, and it just really brought the film down for me. I feel like there was just so much more that they could have done here, and I was just very disappointed with their performances overall. I also felt like we just did not get enough of a look into Laura's relationship with Marlon Wayans' character. We get maybe 5 minutes of screen time there before she starts to suspect anything, and it just wasn't enough for me. I felt like we really should have taken the time to dive more into their relationship, and we just really didn't. And again, I would not be complaining that much if this film wasn't so focused on what basically feels like sitcom level writing. I mean, when you realize what they're actually doing in terms of this story, they're not really, Coppola isn't really trying to say anything specific here. In fact, it's hard to tell what she's really trying to say. It feels like she just needed to churn out something quickly, and this is all she could come up with. And I know that she's a lot better than this. And look, Lost in Translation is a very short film. It is, but it's able to get a lot of mileage out of those characters in a very short amount of time, and that's because it's bouncing from dark comedy to some really good, authentic drama, and that's just not the case with On the Rocks. Its entire focus is, like, very low-level comedy, and it was just very disappointing overall. I felt like there was just so much more they could have done, and they just really didn't. And especially when you realize what this is going to amount to, how little it's going to amount to, it just ends up being so disappointing in terms of the story. I just felt like there's so much more they could have dived into, and they just didn't. So yeah, I was very disappointed by the screenplay here. And look, I'm not saying that films can't be lighthearted, I'm fine with that, but there has to be more of a purpose to it than what we have in this film, because unfortunately the way things are done, it just doesn't feel like there is. It always feels like this is a very small event that should be a lot more than it is, and it just isn't, and that's what was so frustrating me about this film, is that I just kept thinking about how this could be so much better, and it just never really was, unfortunately. One thing I will definitely say, though, about this film, and the other thing I think that does elevate it, is the cinematography here, which is gorgeous throughout. There are so many good shots in this film. Just shots alone of the two of them in a car, but not actually seeing them in a car, like it being like a point of view shot. Those things are still really well done. I think the cinematography in this film is very strong. Philippa Lasorde's cinematography, I think that he did a very good job with constructing this film, and I think it's one of the best aspects of it for sure. The score by Phoenix, though, Also, I didn't really felt stuck out all that much and just didn't really do much for me overall. It's not very memorable. It's not really something that I can remember in the grand scheme of things. And the editing, I just feel this film was very under-edited. I feel like at 90 minutes was just not enough for this story. There needed to be more time to delve into these characters. There needed to be more time to get a hold of what was really going on, why this matters so much, because it never really feels like it does. It all feels very it all just feels very inconsequential throughout the entire film, and you're really just kind of wondering, like, what is the real necessity of all of this? Why does this really matter? You know, the reasonings for why Wayans is involved in this affair, they just feel like they're grasping at straws. It just doesn't feel like that strong of a narrative, and I feel like that's what really hurt this film overall. On the Rocks overall is a film that does have a lot of potential behind it. It has some very talented actors. It has an interesting premise, but overall, it just feels so basic. There's never really an attempt to dive deep into what it wants to. It always feels like it's keeping you at an arm's length in the story, and it simply is just far too focused on humor that I just did not really find funny very much at all. It does have two really strong performances from Rashida Jones and Bill Murray, but they can only do so much, unfortunately. And as a film, as I was watching this, I just found it to be very dull. I found this to be a film that was not really engaging me. As it was going along, I just kept thinking this is a film that I'm very much going to forget, and unfortunately, that's where I very much am with it. You know, I saw this film about a week ago. It really has not stuck with me since then, and unfortunately, I think it's only going to continue to lose me over time. And this being Sofia Coppola's big return, I really expected a lot more from her. I really would have expected this film to be a lot better than it was, but unfortunately what we have here is just a very standard and very dull film that I think is going to leave my mind very quickly. So unfortunately, because that, I am going to give On the Rocks overall a C. But over, guys, in my review of On the Rocks, most guys saw this movie, all of your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Moving on.